How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Weatherspoon 5000, and in this video, of course, we're going to talk more about Tropical Storm Philippe, which is expected to impact the Lesser Antilles at this point. And we're also going to take a look at our next potential tropical storm that could develop right over the Gulf of Mexico, because take a look at the latest run of the GFS model. The GFS model does bring a pretty high amount of convective activity over the Gulf of Mexico, and we see a well-defined low pressure system in the very long-term future, right around the October 11th time frame, and we see the millibar pressure drop down to tropical storm status and does actually make landfall in the United States. We're going to determine the chance we're going to see a tropical storm in the Gulf of Mexico in this video, but taking a look at several different factors that could potentially enhance the possibility of a tropical storm or potentially suppress the possibility we will see tropical storm Sean. So first, I want to show you guys what the Climate Prediction Center is stating at this time, and we do see it isn't different compared to the days prior, where the Climate Prediction Center is still persisting on the idea that tropical storm development is possible right around the Yucatan Peninsula, anywhere between the Western Caribbean as well as the Southern Gulf of Mexico, and this extends to the week ending October 17th, where there is a pretty large, well, I wouldn't say a large possibility, but there is at least a large area where the possibility of tropical cyclone development exists. And of course, since it is the area that's most prominent for tropical cyclone development during the month of October, along with the fact that sea surf temperatures right now over the Gulf of Mexico and the Western Caribbean are a lot warmer than usual, that would make me believe that we could be in for at least an enhancement of tropical cyclone development right over this area, especially since there could be a gyre that will continue on into the middle part of October. And what a gyre does is that it enhances the convective activity right around the Central American region. And if we were to see some of that convective activity move a little bit further northward into the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, that area of convective activity could potentially grow into our next tropical storm. So this does make me believe that there will at least be something developing in the Gulf of Mexico or the Caribbean during the middle part of October, especially since now the GFS model is showing a little bit of a trend where it wants to develop a tropical storm. So here's the current water vapor imagery for the Northern Atlantic, and of course, we have, at least right now, we have two active tropical disturbances. We have Tropical Depression Rena, but it's expected to fizzle out thanks to the dry air and the strong wind shear it's dealing with, so nothing to worry about there. But moving our focus a little bit further southward, that's where it does become a little bit more of a concern for the Caribbean, because we still have Tropical Storm Philippe. There's still plenty of convective activity going on, especially along the eastern side. However, it's still fairly lopsided, and it's still considered a weak tropical storm. It's hovering around 50 miles per hour when it comes to maximum wind speed, and it's expected to stay rather weak, at least for the time it's fairly close to the Lesser Antilles, which is good news. We certainly don't want to see this intensify as it heads closer to the Lesser Antilles, but you still need to watch out for potential tropical storm force impacts right over the Lesser Antilles, since the eye is expected to move uncomfortably close to the point where a landfall could maybe be possible. I'll say a landfall is less likely. It'll most likely brush you guys very, very closely right over the Lesser Antilles, but I definitely wouldn't rule out a tropical storm landfall, especially if we do see this small ridge located right around this area end up being a little bit stronger than anticipated, which would steer the storm a little bit further southwestward. I'll keep you guys updated if we could potentially see an enhanced risk of a landfall right over the Lesser Antilles. However, I will at the very least say you should expect tropical storm force impacts right over the Lesser Antilles, which includes heavy rainfall, gusty winds, of course life-threatening rip currents along the coast. So we definitely need to watch out for that right up along the Lesser Antilles. In terms of anything else in the northern Atlantic, we do have a mid-latitude low that's located just off the northeast. That's bringing rather dry conditions right now over the northeast. And what's interesting is that it does bring a decent amount of convective activity right over the Gulf of Mexico, but none of these clusters of thunderstorms are expected to develop, at least have any chance of developing potentially into our next tropical storm. However, I wouldn't be surprised that in one of these next few mid-latitude lows, they could provide an ample amount of moisture right over the Gulf of Mexico to enhance the possibility of a tropical storm developing. That's what the GFS model is forecasting, which I'll show you guys right now. So here's a quick look at the GFS model's forecast when it comes to relative humidity in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. We do see that the tropical storm Philippe does come uncomfortably close, and it's expected to intensify quite a bit as it continues ahead further northward, because the dry air that's currently inhibiting it isn't expected to stay for long, because like I said, this mid-latitude low that I just showed you on the satellite imagery is expected to move even further eastward, which would allow the moisture on the tail end of this storm system to move a little bit further southward and create a more unstable environment right over this area for this storm system to continue to intensify without the dry air necessarily being much of a problem anymore for this storm system, since this area of convective activity is expected to moisten up the atmosphere, fizzle out the stable air, and that would create an open area to where this will intensify and potentially up to major hurricane status in the very long-term future, and the wind shear won't be strong enough to deter that from occurring. The sea surface temperatures are, of course, warmer than average for this time of the year over this area, so this likely will become a pretty strong hurricane, potentially a major hurricane in the more long-term future. However, the good news is that, of course, this is expected to move out to sea thanks to the strong westerly winds we're seeing, and that's what's typical during the month of October, especially for a storm system that's located this far to the east. It's very, very difficult to be this far up northward without being deterred by the strong westerly winds. During the month of October, of course, the temperature cools down in the northern hemisphere, and that's when we begin to see more baroclinic influences take hold of the latitudes that are a little bit further northward, and that enhances the wind speed, which in return enhances the westerly winds for the storm system. For storm systems to have a difficult time to be able to move further westward without being deterred by strong westerly winds, and that's exactly what the GFS model is expecting. However, I still will point out, even though this storm system will be hundreds of miles off the United States coast, you need to be aware of the possibility of strong rip currents, even if it's, like I said, very far out to sea, because this storm is still quite strong and the waves could still reach the United States, as well as a dangerous rip current. So make sure to take necessary precautions right up along the coast. If you're advised not to swim in the water thanks to a high rip current risk, then you definitely don't want to risk going in, because unfortunately rip currents are one of the leading causes of deaths, of weather-related deaths in the United States, and it's unfortunate because it's very easily avoidable. Just stay out the water, don't put your life at risk, and just make sure to be aware of the rip current risk right up along the East Coast. But yeah, this is going to move out to sea, not expected to impact Bermuda as well, which is certainly good news. Now, moving our focus to our next potential tropical cyclone, which could develop anywhere between the Western Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico. So taking a look at how the GFS model wants to play this out. So over the next few days, it's expected to remain relatively dry right over the Gulf of Mexico, thanks to a strong northerly flow we're seeing associated with this mid-latitude low and this pressure gradient between this ridge. It's expected to bring the more stable, cooler air mass towards the Gulf of Mexico, and it's expected to stick around for quite some time. We do have a small low located over this area, but the wind shear is just a little bit too strong, and plus it really is going to have a difficult time trying to compete for energy when we have literally Hurricane Philippe right next to it. So this area of moisture isn't expected to have any possibility of developing in the near future. However, like I pointed out a little bit earlier, there is expected to be a pretty strong mid-lat to low moving through the Canadian area, and on the tail end of it, we could see an enhanced area of convective activity, and this could set the stage for the possibility of a tropical storm to develop along with this hurricane that's expected to develop in the eastern Pacific. If we were to see the troughing just strong enough right over the Gulf of Mexico, that would be able to steer this eastern Pacific hurricane a little bit further northward earlier, which would allow the energy to move into the Gulf of Mexico, and we could see enough of that energy to where this would redevelop, I should say, into a tropical cyclone right over the Gulf of Mexico, and that's what the GFS model is forecasting. Of course, this is super far out. This is 240 hours out, so 10 days out. However, it's interesting that both the European and the GFS model are at least expecting just a little bit of this moisture associated with this mid-lat to low to move into the Gulf of Mexico, and like I said, along with the much warmer than average sea surface temperatures we're seeing over the Gulf of Mexico, I do believe that it's at least something to be aware of by the time we approach the October 10th time frame, especially if we do see this eastern Pacific hurricane move northward into the Gulf of Mexico and provide more moisture and energy right over this area. Now, let's take a look at the 500 millibar height anomaly because it gives a better idea of what I'm talking to you guys about. So let's move all the way back. There's this big ridge. This mid-latitude cyclone moves through the United States, and it digs in far south enough to where we see enough of weakness and ridging to where this eastern Pacific hurricane would be forced to move northward and provide the Gulf of Mexico with energy. Now, that will be, and the key thing that would potentially trigger this tropical storm will be this mid-latitude low right here. If it digs down far south enough, and if it's strong enough to bring a higher amount of convective activity over the Gulf of Mexico, and then we would see an enhanced risk of tropical cyclone activity, since we wouldn't see a lot of stability or not necessarily a ridge dominate the Gulf of Mexico, and that would just allow for a lot more lift over that area. But the European model, if we were to take a look at that, the 500 millibar height anomaly in the European model scenario, we do see the European model doesn't expect this trough to be as strong for the convective activity to exist right over the Gulf of Mexico. It does expect the same trough to move through. Let me go to the 12Z run for the more long-term future of what the European model is stating. But here's what the European model is forecasting. It expects this trough to still be relatively strong, but doesn't dig as far south enough. We still see a pretty strong ridge dominate the Gulf of Mexico and the Western Caribbean, and that would mean that this Eastern Pacific hurricane wouldn't have enough, there wouldn't at least be enough of weakness and ridging in this area for this Eastern Pacific hurricane to move northward quick enough, and that would allow the Gulf of Mexico to pretty much not have enough energy for a tropical cyclone to develop, because this Eastern Pacific hurricane is still over the Eastern Pacific. It hasn't moved northward yet to provide the energy for tropical cyclone development. So how far south this trough digs and how strong it is will be key in determining if we could see tropical storm Sean by the October 10th timeframe over the Gulf of Mexico. I'll certainly keep you guys updated once certainty rises over the next few days. So make sure to stay tuned for more updates. When it comes to Tropical Storm Philippe, however, this is the amount of rainfall you should expect right over the Lesser Antilles. Pretty much anywhere between 2 to 3 inches of rain, not a ton of rain, but remember, some of this rain could be falling at a very fast clip, which could lead to the possibility of flash flooding. So you want to be aware of that possibility right over some of the islands. But outside of that, the rain shouldn't be too bad, as most of the convective activity will be located on the eastern side, so Lesser Antilles would be shielded from the worst of the rainfall and flooding. Here's the National Hurricane Center's projected path when it comes to Tropical Storm Philippe. The National Hurricane Center expects this to move just to the north of the Lesser Antilles. A landfall may still be possible if it's on the the western edge of this projected path. And we have to also remember that only 2/3 of the time a tropical cyclone would stay within the projected path. So there's still a 1/3 of a chance this moves out of it. So landfall is still technically possible. I'll say it's less likely, but at the very least, I expect tropical storm force impacts, 2 to 3 inches of rain, and wind gusts hovering around 40 to 50 miles per hour at the very least. So make sure to prepare for conditions, tropical storm force conditions right over some of the Lesser Antilles Islands. When it comes to what the ensemble members are stating at this time, the GFS ensemble members are pretty much showing what you'd expect with Tropical Storm Philippe. However, I wanted to show you guys this mainly due to the fact that we do have some ensemble members wanting to develop a tropical storm right over the southern Gulf of Mexico. So this should at least keep you guys aware that the possibility certainly does exist. We're going to need to see if this keeps up over the next several days, but I'll keep you guys updated. But that's it for now, guys. Thank you guys for watching, and make sure to subscribe for more weather-related content, and like this video if you do enjoy it.